So when I was first diagnosed with lupus, I searched for books and information on the disease, and I really wanted to know what was out there and what other people were experiencing. And what I found were fabulous books on the disease. I found books about the symptom activity. I found books about the lab work, about issues that I would come across. But what I failed to find was a book that was a step-by-step instruction on how to deal with it, on how to improve my life with lupus, and how to kind of take command of the disease and change my situation so that I could start living well despite it. So I decided, you know what, if there's nothing out there, I'll write one myself. So my goal in writing a book myself about my experience with lupus and the steps I've taken to live well is definitely to prevent other people from spending as much time spinning their wheels as I did about trying to push through disease and fight so hard against it. I think if I had embraced the disease from the beginning and said, you know what, this is a chronic illness, this is something I really need to work into my life rather than try to push it to the side and act like it's not happening, the sooner you can do that, the sooner you can start living well despite the illness. I talk a lot in my book about embracing, about saying, you know, this is my life today with lupus. What can you do best to live well rather than working so hard to act like it's not there and ignore the symptoms. I have a chapter devoted to dealing with your doctor because I think it's paramount to health and wellness that you develop a really strong doctor-patient relationship and that it's not one-sided, that you don't walk into the doctor's office and say, all right, what are you going to do for me now? What medications can you give me? It needs to be a collaborative one. It needs to be one of confidence and one where you get your questions answered rather than, again, it just being one-sided. I have a chapter devoted to communicating with your family. I think it's extremely difficult, first of all, to wrap your head around a chronic illness for yourself and to figure out who you are now that you have this chronic illness, what your identity is, how you can still contribute. And I think it's even harder to convey that to your family members. There are going to be people who don't understand what you're dealing with. There are people who look just like me, who look pretty darn healthy, but their insides are falling apart. And it's very difficult to convey that to friends and family. I also have a chapter devoted to letting go. And I think this is probably the hardest part. And that's why it's one of the end chapters, because you kind of have to build up to making that happen. Just the concept of finally letting go and saying, this is life with lupus. Are there any aspects of my life that I'm desperately holding on to my identity before lupus? And I found that if you are, once you're able to kind of, again, let those go and stop comparing pre-lupus to post-lupus, once you kind of say, all right, this is what I've got to work with, how am I going to make the best of it? That's when you can kind of start rebuilding and really putting one step in front of the other and making progress. The original goal with the book was to provide people with an example of what it's like to live with lupus, of the trial and error that I experienced, of the tribulations, of the mistakes that I made along the way, and certainly the successes that I've had, and kind of lay those out in a step-by-step process so that it's something tangible and it's something you can sink your teeth into. And it's something that you can say, every day I'm doing something to make my lupus better. Regardless of the physical effects, regardless of where you are, emotionally you can make progress in your life with lupus. A sidebar to that has been connecting with thousands and thousands of people across the world, which has made my life with lupus that much richer. Every time somebody reaches out to me to say, I totally get what you're saying in your book, I felt that exact way, or I could have written that chapter, I think, wow, I'm not crazy. So every time I get that feedback, it just makes my life more complete, because I realize, you know, there was a reason I put that out there. There's a reason I talk so candidly about my life with lupus in my book and my blog, because other people are recognizing that they're not alone.